Have you ever wondered why so many conflicts, both throughout history and even today, seem to explode from faiths that all worship the very same God? It's a huge paradox, right? You have religions with shared roots, shared prophets, all pointing to one divine source, but their story is so often filled with division. Well, today, we're going to dig into how a divine message, one that's supposed to be crystal clear, gets filtered through the complicated, messy, and often flawed lens of us, humanity.
To even begin to unpack that, we've got to go right to the absolute heart of the Islamic faith, and it all starts with a simple declaration, a statement known as the Shahada. As the slide asks, how can just two sentences shape the entire reality for billions? Well, because in Islam, these two sentences are the key to absolutely everything.
So let's dive into that first key, this foundational belief in one God, one truth. Getting a handle on this idea of divine unity is so important because it's the bedrock for the ideal of perfect harmony, and kind of ironically, it's also the starting point for where all the disagreements later begin.
Now, the Shahada isn't just some phrase you recite. Think of it more like the pair of glasses you put on to see the world. It does two critical things. First, it clears away all the clutter, all the false idols, all the distractions. And second, it brings one single absolute truth into sharp focus. It's the ultimate statement of what is real.
So the first part is this powerful statement of a concept called Tawhid, and that's the absolute, indivisible oneness of God. In this worldview, God is the one and only creator, the only absolute reality. Everything else you see, everything else that exists, is completely dependent on that one source. It's all temporary. He is eternal.
Then, bam, the second part comes in. Muhammad is the messenger of God. And what this does is brilliant. It takes that massive, abstract, cosmic truth we just talked about, and it grounds it right here on Earth, in human history. It creates a direct line of communication, turning the divine from just a big idea into a real, accessible, and actionable message delivered through a specific person.
And what's so fascinating is how this single idea of one God has these incredible ripple effects. Suddenly, all of reality is just a reflection of God's will. Knowledge isn't just about facts, it's about willfully accepting that truth. Even disbelief gets reframed. It's not just ignorance, it's seen as actively rejecting a truth you already know deep down. And here's the most crucial part. The sources emphasize that God's number one attribute is mercy, a quality that is said to always come before wrath. Definitely keep that in mind.
Okay, so you might be wondering, if the divine message is so clear, so merciful, then where does all the conflict, all the messiness come from? Well, it starts with the very people receiving the message, us. It starts with the human condition itself. The sources paint this picture of humanity as this incredible paradox. It's like we're two things at once. On one hand, we have these divine attributes. We're empowered with knowledge to be caretakers of the earth. But on the other hand, we are fundamentally flawed, totally capable of pride, greed, and sin that can lead us to our own ruin. This constant tug-of-war inside of us, that's the real stage where all these religious conflicts actually play out.
So, how does a merciful God guide this flawed, paradoxical creation? Well, according to Islamic teaching, it's not a one-and-done deal. It's through a long, continuous chain of guidance stretching back through time. Just think about that for a second. This is such a powerful idea. Islam doesn't see itself as some brand new religion that just appeared out of nowhere. It sees itself as the final chapter in a really, really long book. It looks at the messages of past prophets not as competing ideas, but as part of the exact same divine story sent to humanity over and over again for millennia.
So you can see the logic here, right? It's not a bunch of separate stories. It's one single, continuous narrative. Past revelations are respected, the whole chain of prophets is celebrated, and the Quran is presented as the culmination, the final, perfectly preserved version of that original message that's been sent all along. Okay, let's put the pieces together. You've got this divine ideal of perfect unity, and you give it to, well, us, flawed humans. So what happens when these paradoxical creatures try to actually build a community in the real world?
I mean, the ideal is just stunning, right? It's this vision of a community so tightly bound by empathy and love that it literally acts like a single living body. If one part hurts, the whole body feels it and rushes to help. This is the goal, the dream, a society that reflects divine unity in its own perfect human unity.
But then, reality comes crashing in. That human paradox shows up again. Very, very early in Islamic history, the community was torn apart by the first fitna, the first civil war. Things like political favoritism,
personal ambition, and arguments over who should lead after the third caliph, Usman, was killed, it all boiled over into actual war. I mean, think about it. Companions of the Prophet, people who had fought side by side for the faith, were now on opposite sides of a battlefield. That beautiful ideal of being one body was shattered by the cold, hard reality of human politics.
This incredibly painful part of their history, this collision of the divine ideal with human reality, it forced the community to develop a practical playbook. How do you live together? How do you handle disagreements and even conflict when you know that perfect unity just isn't guaranteed?
And what's interesting is that the framework for how to deal with this is right there in the sources. The example set by the Prophet in Medina involved making treaties with other communities, a core principle of fairness for all, and putting compassion front and center. The duty to give charity, for instance, is even extended to non-believers, which really underlines a sense of shared human dignity.
But, and this is crucial, the texts are also incredibly realistic. They don't pretend conflict doesn't exist. Fighting, which is called qital, is described as something that's prescribed, even if believers hate the very idea of it. There's this clear-eyed understanding that survival in a tough world requires not just faith, but also strategy, toughness, and practical, proactive steps. It's a framework for dealing with the world as it is, not just as we wish it would be.
And this leads us to this really fascinating tension that comes straight out of that history of conflict. While the ideal ruler is a just protector of the law and the community, the sources suggest that a more practical preference often takes over. To avoid the chaos of another civil war, stability becomes the absolute top priority. And to get that stability, there's often a tendency to prefer a strong, maybe even a ruthless ruler. Someone whose main job is to hold things together, sometimes prioritizing raw power over personal piety.
So, we circle right back to where we started. How can a faith built on a message of absolute unity lead to conflict? It seems the answer isn't because the message itself is flawed, but because the actors, the people tasked with living it, are human. We are that paradox, full of divine potential, but also earthly weakness. The real struggle, then, isn't just about different readings of a holy book. It's the struggle inside human nature itself, that constant, difficult, and unavoidable search for balance between the divine ideal we aim for and the human reality we live in.